multiple people can be exposed to the same thing, and one person maybe has trauma from it and another person might not, or it can be interesting how we're not all affected in the same way.
Came home and my parents could see that I was a completely different kid. It's one of the few therapies recommended by the World Health Organization for treating PTSD in both adults and children that doesn't require you to go into great detail about the trauma. So it can make it less emotionally taxing, and it's had a profound impact on me. Welcome to the Inner Fire of Yoga, a podcast about transformation, resilience, and the power of yoga beyond the mat. I'm Liz Albanis, senior yoga teacher and yoga therapist in training. This podcast was born in 2024 after I survived my second fire. Fire has been a recurring theme in my life, not just in the literal sense, but as a metaphor. It has asked me to burn away what no longer serves me, to transform and to rise stronger each time. This podcast is about that fire, the one that challenges us, but also fuels us to grow.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host Liz Albanis. The content shared in these conversations is intended for informational and educational purposes only, and it's not suitable for listeners under the age of 18. Please use discretion and consult a qualified professional before making changes to your health or wellness routines.
This week I'm doing something a little different. I'm sharing a podcast guest feature from the Get Loud podcast with Kristen Klipp that was recorded in April of this year. She's kindly given me the authority to do this. I want to say a special thank you to the host, Kristen Klipp, for this fantastic interview. You can find a link to the Get Loud podcast in the show notes to check out more interviews just like this.
Welcome, folks, to the Get Loud podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Klipp, and today we have Liz Albanis. She's a senior yoga teacher in Australia, and she owns Liz Albanis Wellness. Liz, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Kristen. Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Today, Liz and I will be talking about trauma experiences and trauma healing modalities. This episode may contain triggering content for some people. Liz talks about her experiences with trauma as a child, as well as experiences with fire and how that has been a traumatic experience. So please be advised to use caution and know that this episode may be triggering for some. And if you do find this episode triggering, please find care and compassion and love for yourself. And know that you are being held in this experience. With that being said, let's get started.
Happy to have you. And I'd love for you, if you want to start, to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I've just moved into state and I'm currently just working online, teaching yoga privately, and I'll have some courses that I'm releasing later in the year. And I've taught a lot of face-to-face yoga, and I've taught a lot of Pilates and bar. And I used to be a personal trainer. And before that, I was working for the Australian federal government here in Canberra. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us here today. Now, you and I had talked a little before the episode about your experiences with trauma. And I was wondering if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about your experiences with trauma and with complex PTSD as you've experienced it.
Yeah, sure. So you explained it beautifully in your first episode about how we all experience trauma in our lives. But some of us, unfortunately, get diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which used to be just seen for war veterans, getting diagnosed with such a thing, but it's not just war veterans who get it. And it means that 6 months after the event or the events, you've still got those symptoms from the trauma, pretty much from my understanding. So they don't diagnose someone with it straight after the event that caused it. Now, so I've got diagnosed with it at age 11. I went to an abusive school with an international school with teachers from overseas, some of them who hit us, a lot of them that called us stupid. And unfortunately, I went overseas on a trip. It was supposed to be a month-long trip or something from memory. And in those days, people who identify as male, they were allowed to, be alone with female students, any students really. Like, they could be, alone with people and not supervised, or they wouldn't be two teachers. And one of them was a pedophile. And as a result, I was sexually assaulted on that trip overseas. And I also had a billet mother. I stayed with a family there, and my French wasn't up to scratch because I was behind in the class because I didn't have a French-speaking family. And she was quite abusive as well. And that's why I ended up staying with my teacher and his fiancée the last few nights. And as a result, was sexually assaulted and, witnessed a couple doing things that 11-year-olds shouldn't really see or be around. And then I came home and my parents could see that I was a completely different kid. They just knew. And I got assessed by a psychologist and that, and I wasn't diagnosed with anything, but they knew that whatever happened over there had a dramatic impact on me. But because I had ongoing things happen to me at school, and then, I had some other things happen, like I survived my first fire in 2004. I ended up being diagnosed with complex PTSD. So complex PTSD is apparently not officially recognized in the DSM-5, and I'm not speaking here as a therapist. I'm just speaking here from what I've been told and what I've read. But it's often misdiagnosed with other things, and it often often people have ADHD as well, and I have ADHD. I only found that out at 41, a couple of years ago. So complex PTSD is when someone has had multiple traumatic events or ongoing trauma, repetitive trauma, like I have. And I think some might say it changes the brain more and has more of a profound impact, but I think we're all different, and who knows, but it is a different diagnosis. And I think some therapists used to call it multiple personality disorder, but that's either confused as a different thing, or it's not a diagnosis that's used anymore. I'm not sure, but that's what complex PTSD is. It's that repetition. So I was going really well with my mental health, as I will talk about later. But then, was it 13 hours before the 20th anniversary of the first fire, my family and I suffered another fire, a different sort of fire. The first fire, the house was okay, but I had second and third degree burns because I was smoking at the time. And yeah, the house was okay, but I wasn't. This fire started next door, so it was really sudden. It was 11 o'clock at night. Made national news here in Australia for some reason, maybe because 3 houses were affected and 50 firefighters were there. and 14 trucks. Yeah, it was crazy. But it was 11 o'clock at night. I was about to put my phone on silent, and one of the security cameras went off. And it was one of the cameras that doesn't usually go off. It was on one side of the house. And there'd been a lot of burglaries because the crime's gone up here a lot where I was in Melbourne. And I thought, oh no, it's a burglar. And I looked at the camera. I didn't have the sound on. If I'd had the sound on, I would have heard the house next door crashing down. But I saw what I thought was a ghost. And I thought, hang on a minute. And as I did this, my husband, who was downstairs, came pounding up the stairs of a 2-story house. I was like, call 911 for you guys. Next door's on fire. And I had my phone in my hand, obviously, and I started to call them. And he said, I'm running down the back to get Audrey, a then 4-year-old. And yeah, and we were out of the house in 2 minutes. Our house wasn't on fire. The smoke was over the fence, but by the time we got out of the house, it had hit our house. And our daughter was sound asleep. And the front door was deadlocked. And we're like, oh no, where are the front keys? And neighbors were pounding on the front door, get out, get out. And it was just really surreal. And my husband got his car out of the garage and he didn't get mine. I told him not to, but we went across the road to the park, and there are a lot of people watching, as that's what people do, and because they're worried about their own house, which is fair enough, or they've evacuated too. And we just stood there shaking, and that's pretty normal, shaking during such a time, as I'll get to a bit later.
Yeah.
And it affected me more than it did my daughter and my husband, because I'd already had that diagnosis and it was my second fire. And it freaked me out that it was 13 hours before the 20th anniversary. I'm like, that's a bit strange.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Luckily, my daughter, of course, she's scared. Like she's more aware of it. Like the next week when she went to daycare, she was like, well, where are the smoke alarms and where are the evacuation points? Can we do another drill? But she recovered a lot quicker from it and got assessed by a therapist, and touch wood, she's fine. And it's just it's 14 months later now. But it affected me more because of my history. My brain had already changed, because that it does change the brain. And yeah, it made my husband more aware of fires, but it didn't affect him as much. But we're all different. Some of us are more susceptible to that, the effects of trauma.
Absolutely, right? Multiple people can be exposed to the same thing, and one person maybe has trauma from it and another person might not, or, it can be interesting how we're not all affected in the same way.
Yeah, yeah. We're all special and unique.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story.
Oh, you're welcome.
It sounds like it's been a difficult road to be diagnosed at such a young age and to be affected by these other traumatic events that have occurred in your life as well.
Yeah, it has been tough. I mean, it's always can be tougher, and I'm not saying we're not grateful to have not lost everything, but people still grieve. People still find dealing with a large insurance claim that takes nearly a year to resolve frustrating and stressful. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, people still are affected by it. Yeah.
Now, along your journey, could you talk about some of the tools that have helped you? I know before this podcast, we talked about how you're a yoga teacher, you've done EMDR, and you've done TRE. Would you like to talk a bit more about each of those modalities?
Yeah, I'd love to, because I'm not against medication for mental health. I'm on medication myself, but I do like to think that there are other tools we can use rather than just talk therapy and medication. I think
Right.
other things are important as well. So I discovered yoga in January 2011 back in my home city of Canberra. And it's a small city in Australia, and it's a bit behind the big cities of Sydney and Melbourne, even though it's the capital. And Bikram yoga was a thing then. It's not such a thing now, but it was a thing then. This was a long time ago, 2011. And my friend was like, oh, you need to come. You'll detox, you'll burn lots of calories. You'll get more flexible for your horse riding, because I was, had horses at the time, or a horse. And I went along, and it was torture. I mean, it was 90 minutes long. It was hot yoga. It was 40 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. It's hot.
Yeah.
It's hot.
We have Bikram yoga here too. So anyone who's done Bikram yoga knows that I think it's like 110 Celsius Fahrenheit or something like that. So yeah, it's pretty hot.
Yeah, it's hot. And so it was a struggle to stay in the room, especially the first time when you don't know when it's going to end. It's a set sequence.
Yeah.
So once you're used to it, you know when you get into the end. And I couldn't wait to run out of that room. But I felt amazing after. I couldn't sleep because yoga doesn't always help you sleep. Later on, it didn't have that effect on me, but I got a bit more flexible, but the most important thing that happened was I discovered the power that yoga can have on your mind. It's about mind training, really. It's a spiritual practice that helps reduce suffering and, gets us into that state of yoga, that state of contentment and peace and happiness. And 3 months later, I managed to quit smoking. And smoking is something I took up around age 14 or 15 at school. I was peer pressured into it, but because I had my issues with the PTSD and I was more prone to that, susceptible to addiction and experimenting with things like that. And I'd struggled to quit for years. And at the time I started yoga, I was working in the federal government in Australia, and it was a job I didn't like. I wasn't really suited to that work. I'm not saying working for the government is bad or, my husband works for the government. He loves it. It wasn't for me. And it was my way of coping with stress. And then I found yoga, and I had other ways of coping with stress, lifting my mood, and instead of using cigarettes and alcohol. And then I since read that 80% of people who practice yoga, either they start practicing yoga for mental health reasons or they keep practicing for mental health reasons, according to the research that's out there. So it made a lot of sense. And because before that, I just relied on medication, going to the gym, horse riding, and talk therapy. And also, the word has lost me. When do you get, I'm thinking, the word hasn't come to me when someone puts you into a trance. What's that word?
Oh, hypnosis.
Hypnosis. I had hypnosis. They were the only other things I'd tried for my mental health, hypnosis. And the hypnosis helped with the nightmares temporarily, but not permanently. Yeah. The other things helped with that. So that was the start of me discovering, there's more that you can do for your mental health than what I tried in the past. Yeah, and I also had the effect of me starting to look after myself better and not just quit smoking, but eating better, not, eating for mental health. And that can have a profound effect, what we eat. Well, you feel how you eat, as Professor Felice Jacker in Melbourne says, who's a nutritional psychiatrist. Yeah, so, that was the start of me discovering other things, I think.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing when your yoga practice started, and that it wasn't all butterflies and rainbows, right? Like it sort of started in a way that wasn't great, but you found ways that yoga was able to help you in your journey.
Yeah, yeah. And it expanded beyond Bikram, which is good too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Luckily, there's many parts of yoga that you can explore. So
Yeah.
that's
And
always good.
it doesn't have to be heated. It doesn't have to involve flexibility. It doesn't have to
Right.
involve poses, really. Yeah.
Right. Well, so you had also mentioned to me that EMDR was helpful to you. Could you talk a little bit about what EMDR is and how you've experienced using that modality in your healing journey?
Yeah, sure. I first heard of EMDR, which stands for, I have trouble saying this one, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing in 2008. And it wasn't really as well known then. And I was told it was a bunch of hocus pocus and not to look into it. And there was no one in Canberra who offered it anyway. And my psychiatrist at the time was like, no, don't, it's just, hocus pocus. And I moved to Melbourne in 2017 and much bigger city. And in 2019, I had my daughter, and I happened to find a therapist who is a trauma therapist, specializes in EMDR. So it's a structured therapy designed to help people resolve distressing memories that contribute to PTSD, anxiety and depression. And it's now backed by over 25 scientific studies. And it's one of the few therapies recommended by the World Health Organization for treating PTSD in both adults and children. I believe they don't just use it for people with PTSD, they do treat it for other things like people who have depression
Hmm.
and things like that. So it's one of the only things other than trauma-focused CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which never worked for me, I must say. Not that I'm against it, it just didn't work for me. It's, yeah, it's also endorsed by the Australian and the American Psychological Associations. And yeah, so I thought initially I'd only need a few sessions, and I think some people do, but if as we've been saying, we're all different. I've had many sessions, and there's different protocols. Some therapists use a machine. It pretty much involves you looking side to side, you know, following either someone's finger or a machine at various speeds. And there's different protocols if you're processing a really old memory from childhood or recent one like with me last year. So my therapist did different protocols on me, and she uses a machine most of the time, but there's different protocols, and I'm not a therapist, but it's guided eye movement. And the thing about it is it doesn't require you to go into great detail about the trauma. So it can make it less emotionally taxing. And it's had a profound impact on me, a profound, amazing impact on me. Yeah, that and the yoga. But
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, but the one thing I would say about it is it's not something I'd recommend you try and do yourself, because you can buy EMDR machines and books. It's something I think you need to do with a qualified therapist, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Hmm. Yeah. I also had experience with EMDR, and I've done it with the rapid eye movement you were mentioning. I've also done it where I'm holding these two little kind of balls and they're pulsating
Oh,
as so instead of the rapid eye movement, they're kind of doing that same movement or just pulsating at various speeds depending on what we're working through. And often it's to try to find a better thought, right? So there we might start with like, this is the thought that's causing suffering. And then the goal, at least for the sessions I've been in, have been to come to a better thought that makes me feel better. And so often when I've done it, it has definitely, like, I walk away feeling like, oh, I feel better about that specific situation. And so, yeah, there's different ways to do it. I would definitely recommend being with a practitioner, because I think too that it can be more helpful if you have someone kind of guiding you through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do some of it myself at home, but that's only to
Yeah,
regular want to process something, and only because I've been doing it since 2019, and
right.
it's I have a guided therapist.
Yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, they sometimes use the pulsators as well as headphones and lights. Or yeah, you're
right.
right.
Yeah.
So many ways they do it, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of training involved for therapists to get qualified in it. And there's more and more research that's coming out on it. I know that the therapist I've been using, she recently went overseas to do more training on it as well. So yeah, it's amazing what's coming out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other modality you had mentioned to me was TRE. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what that is and what that entails as well?
Yeah, sure. So TRE used to stand for just trauma release exercises, but it's now known as tension and trauma release exercises, and it was developed by David Bocelli, who discovered that it helps the body release deep muscular tension through a natural shaking or tremor response, something the nervous system is wired to do after stress or trauma. So, for instance, you've got it's a healthy, so after the fire, I was shaking, but that's actually, it was a healthy shaking. It wasn't,
Hmm.
I mean, people could say it's shock, but it's also a way of your nervous system down regulating itself. What we don't want is someone to go into the freeze state, which they describe in polyvagal theory. Like when my poodle years ago, she got attacked by a kelpie and nearly killed. She froze and just went limp. We don't want that.
Hmm.
The shaking is good. So there's exercises you do to help encourage the body to shake. It's mainly releasing the psoas muscle. So when we suffer a stressful traumatic event, our psoas tightens. So our psoas, as you would know, is a hip flexor muscle, but it's a unique muscle in that it starts in our lower back, lumbar spine, and it's got a connection to thoracic, I believe, and it wraps around the front over a hip into the inner thigh, and it tightens, and that also has an effect of tightening the diaphragm, our primary respiratory muscle we should use for breathing. So it affects our breath and it stops us. The psoas tightening then tightens the diaphragm, which stops us breathing properly, which then affects the central nervous system because how we breathe affects our central nervous system. So he has these exercises to help you release your psoas and to help release the diaphragm, and and if you're feeling hypervigilant, restless, to do these exercises to downregulate yourself, because trauma is said to be held in the body. So there was a case here in Australia where some cattle were exported to another country, I won't say which, but they saw their friends being slaughtered, and and they knew this was going to happen to me next, and they started to shake. They trembled,
Hmm.
the tremors, and that's what we do. And because they did this to downregulate their central nervous system, and when the cattle were slaughtered and that sort of the meat was eaten, it actually tastes different because the traumas held in the body. And Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book on it called The Body Keeps the Score. And how trauma just lives in the body. It shows up in muscle tension, posture, breath. And so David Bocelli's work is helping to release that tension out of the body, because people who get diagnosed with PTSD are often suffer from chronic pain because of the change in the fascia and the change in the prefrontal cortex in the brain. And yeah, so after the fire, I would shake a lot more. I'd go into anyone who practices yoga, I'd go into a back bend like cobra pose, and I'd start to shake up and down because my body was releasing all of that. And I'd do my myofascial release with the yoga tune-up balls, and I would shake when I released the side of my head and the temporalis next to my eyes. And it never happened before, but that's because I was releasing that trauma that was held in the body. So a lot of therapists, some therapists will only treat people who are practicing somatic things like yoga and TRE alongside talk therapy as a holistic approach for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing all your experiences with these different modalities, because I think it can be sometimes helpful to be doing multiple modalities to help release that trauma from the body and release some of that stored energy and emotions that we're holding that we might not realize are there.
Yeah.
So you and I had talked a little bit, we're both yoga teachers. We had talked a little bit about ways that yoga teachers can make their classes more trauma sensitive. And I know we were sort of discussing how there are even some ways. I've been a trauma sensitive yoga teacher since 2018, and you mentioned another way that teachers can be even more aware of ways that people can be triggered in class. Would you like to share some of those ways that teachers can be more aware and can be cognizant of how they're setting up that space so that it's safe for people with various types of trauma?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's important for us yoga teachers to realize that we're going to have people come in who have that. A lot of teachers have the attitude of like, but no one in my class has trauma or has PTSD. I said, well, how do you know that? They're not going to come and announce it to the class. Oh, by the way, I've got trauma or I've got PTSD. I suffer from anxiety and depression. Most of them aren't going to tell you that. We've got to make the assumption that a lot of us have got stuff going on, and a lot of us come to yoga to relax and, as part of our self-care. And I'm not saying I haven't made mistakes. Oof, my students are my best teachers. Been teaching yoga since 2012, and my teaching has changed. But what came out of the fire that we were talking about is candles. I never thought of candles as a trigger, and if someone has survived a fire, candles, especially in the acute phase, are going to be in a trigger, or they're always going to be a trigger. I know they make nice lighting, they're not bright. And if you're going to use them, that's fine, but advertise it. Say, look, for this class, it's a candle-lit class. We're going to do a special meditation like Tratak, which they use a candle to gaze upon as part of the meditation. So people can go, oh yeah, that class isn't for me. That's going to really trigger me. So advertise it, give people warning, rather than just doing it or saying to people in the class, oh, does anyone mind if I use candles? Because if people may not want to put their hand up and say, oh, yeah, I do mind, because they might get embarrassed. And, or they may just run out of the studio. So I know candles are lovely, but they're not for everyone. I've I've had studio owners who said to me, you have to use them. I would also encourage studio owners not to enforce it. Incense is also going to be an issue, not even just for people who have trauma because of fires. Certain smells, I think, from what I've heard, there was a studio here in Australia and some teacher used incense and the smell triggered it and she had a panic attack.
Oh, wow.
So the incense is something else you've got to consider. Is it a good idea to use it? That's something I'd never thought of either, because again, I've had studio owners that have said to me, no, you've got to light incense in the reception to set the scene.
Right.
So that's something that's really come out for me. There's many things. It's also holding space for your students, centering yourself before class so you can hold space for your students. And knowing that you might have students come into the reception and say, oh, where are the emergency exits? Do you, or if they've suffered a burglary, maybe they're like, do you lock the front doors so no one can come in? Or they might actually ask if your smoke alarms are working, or they may look at your smoke alarms and say, oh, where are the smoke alarms? And I guess the worst thing you could do is laugh and ridicule them and say, oh, look, there's not going to be another fire. Well, I've survived 2, and I know people who've survived 3. So lightning does strike more than once sometimes, but it's good to hold space and have compassion and think, well, yes, I don't notice smoke alarms. Most people don't, but you are going to have students that might. You're going to have students that are going to shake in class because not especially in a hip opening class, a hip opening pose like goddess pose or something, or bridge pose. They might shake in cobra like I did. I think the worst thing you could do is, say to them loudly, why are you shaking in front of the whole class?
Right. Calling them out. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got to learn how to deal with that and make sure, maybe if we're concerned, maybe see if they're okay, but maybe just leave them for a while and see how they're going. Obviously, they're not having a panic attack, and shaking is going to happen in a yoga class. It's somatic. Crying is also common. I've had a few students cry, and I've heard of yoga teachers freaking out when a student.
Really?
Yeah, certain poses will bring out crying. I cried in a yoga class when I did a lot
I
of
have
hip.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
normal. And a lot of yoga teachers freak out, and I guess it could be confronting if it's never happened, but we've got to learn how to deal with that and make sure they're okay if we think they're not, but not, make a big fuss and point them out to everyone as well. I mean, I know someone who lost her father, and she's a yoga teacher herself, and she went to she's got a strong physical practices, and she's one of those people that do handstands. Not that that's necessary. And she went to a vinyasa class, and she pretty much spent the class in child's pose and shavasana, the final resting pose, crying. That's all she needed from her practice that day. That's all she needed, and there's nothing wrong with that. So giving our students options, variations, or using invitational language, like if it feels right for you, rather than no, feet together, you've got to do it that way,
Right.
My teacher.
Yeah, I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode about that too, right? Just
right.
ways to be more trauma sensitive as a teacher, for sure.
Yeah, so they're just some of the things, and I'm not saying they're all of it. I just want to say they're not all of the things, but they're some of the new things that have come out for me since this event. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to, like you had mentioned, saying in the advertising whether there's candlelight. That's something I've noticed in terms of having essential oils or incense or even sage or Palo Santo, because some people have sensitivities to those smells and they really would like to know in advance if that's going to be an issue during the class. So yeah, I think it's very important to be advertising those things that are being offered for specific classes, and also have options that don't have those things for
And yeah,
students as well.
yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but also darkness can be another trigger.
Right.
Keep lights on. If people want darkness, they can use an eye pillow, but don't force students to use an eye pillow, because some of them will get triggered from that for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, that's one that I, again, didn't know about. So thank you for bringing that up on the call. So getting close to wrapping up, but if you want to share, I know we talked about a tool that has been helpful for you, if you'd like to share that with our listeners.
Yeah. So regulating the breath is great. I mean, obviously, if you're really anxious, you might need to get rid of some energy without stirring yourself up too much, but I won't get into that too much. But something we like to use in yoga is bee breath, bumblebee breath. And you can do this just by curling your tongue back towards your tonsils, if you still have them, and taking normal breath in through your nose. And on the exhale, you make a sound of the Z sound of a bee. So it sort of sounds like this. And usually it makes you lengthen your exhale. So you breathe out longer than you inhale. And that helps you calm down with switching on your vagus nerve, which is the nerve that tells your rest digest system to kick in. And the use of the vocal cords does that as well. And then some people cover their face as well with what we call a mudra in yoga. So yeah, and we just do that for a few rounds or maybe more. But if you haven't done it before, try it without blocking your eyes. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Quickly, yeah. Yeah, so it's a great one to calm down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I've used a lot, especially in my kids' yoga class. They like to pretend they're bees.
Oh, yes.
Fun as an adult as well.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. What are some ways that people can work with you and learn more about you?
They can head over to my website, which is lizalbaniswellness.com.au. And I do offer one-on-one sessions with people all around the world, because it's online. And I have be having some more courses coming out to help you learn how to practice yoga at home with various yoga practices that don't have to involve yoga mats, and some myofascial release courses and yin yoga courses to make your fascia, your type of collagenous connective tissue, healthier and happier, to relieve tension, and can help with a holistic approach to trauma. Yeah. And I also mentor. And I also mentor others, but it's all on my website. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Liz. And I'll be including links to your website and your social media in the description of the podcast episode as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you all for joining us on the Get Loud podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks again to Kristen Klipp of the Get Loud podcast for letting me share this. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. I hope today's episode has left you feeling inspired and informed and empowered to take meaningful steps towards your well-being. If there's a topic you'd like me to cover, or if you'd like to share your story, I'd love to hear from you. Just fill in the form on the podcast page of my website. Your voice is an important part of this journey. I want this podcast to reflect the conversations that matter most to my listeners. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might benefit from these conversations. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps grow this incredible community of resilience and support. Until next time, take care of yourself and never forget the power, the possibilities of a regular yoga practice. See you soon.